Hello and welcome to another episode of the Expanse Abridged Podcast series. Today we have Chapter 8 of Leviathan Wakes. It is a Miller chapter. Not a particularly long one, but it's good. We learn a bit more about Miller and a bit more about Julie Mao. So we open with, aggression against the belt is what Earth and Mars survive on. Our weakness is their strength. Don't be afraid of them. Their only power is your fear. And Miller and Havelock listen to this OPA broadcast that's going on. And there's kind of the boys are watching it and they're joking about it. And they're saying, well, that and 100 gunships. And Miller's saying, if you clap your hands, say you believe, they can't even shoot you. And they're basically talking about ever since the riots we had in the last Miller chapter, so chapter 6, all these broadcasts have gone around after the kind of the incident with the can. And Havelock says maybe a dozen like her, and how many files there are out there of this going on is 200 to 300. People broadcasting and sharing things like that, although this one is her favourite because she's foaming at the mouth. And some of the other police officers are finding people passing out little pamphlets. It says VR squids, which I don't actually know what that is, like little VR squids, virtual reality, I don't know, not invertebrates, are they? This one's, I don't know what a squid is, what family they live under, but those boys, the wet boys, so I don't know what that is. And the police aren't even busting them anymore. They're just letting them exist. Because obviously the police out here are mainly belters, even if they do work for an Earth-based security corporation. And Miller says, like, since the week James Holden, the self-appointed martyr, had proudly announced that he and his crew were going to talk to someone from the Martian Navy, series has been very different. And they kind of talk about the breakdown of the footage of the Cant. So obviously that's like a really big issue. Like everyone's talking about it all the time. And that Miller's saying, if you look at the footage, it's like the documents, like the log files, were either perfect or perfectly legitimate or were obviously doctored. The torpedoes were either nuclear torpedoes or would hit the reactor's nuke. It's all either a cover-up, it's actually old footage, etc., etc. All the conspiracy theories are going, and I bet there'd be some good ones as well. The riots had gone for about 3 days, and the guy that Miller shot, the big shirtless big boy, is getting some new knees and filing out a complaint about Miller for shooting his legs out. And there's some normal crime. 600 cubic meters of nitrogen had gone missing from a warehouse. A whore had been beaten and locked up in a storage location. Always get a good bit of whores and brothels. And superficially, everything was business as usual, but only superficially. And we get a bit of a Miller goes into his classic I'm going to tell you a story moment. And he talks about when he worked homicide, the weirdest thing with families was a surreal calm. So someone could be like, my wife just died, but they'd still try and make the police officers food, make them a drink. And it would all look normal to most people, but once you start working, you realise it takes extra quarter of a second to focus, and they realise that's how deep the damage is. So they appear normal, but it takes that quarter of a second extra to focus. And Miller's saying that Sirius Station is taking that quarter second to focus. He's noticed people died when he comes near if he's in uniform. The conversations died, sorry, not them. Miller hasn't killed anybody yet, I don't think. And even middle-class people were avoiding him on the tube the way that petty criminals normally would. And it's saying how even though they're police, people treating them differently, they used to just be security and now they're Earth-based security contractors. And the difference is subtle, it's deep, and Miller realises he wants to react. People are starting to kind of realise he's not entirely on their side. He's not a proper belter because he works for the Earth Corp. So he wants to stand taller to show them with his body he was a belter. Because obviously belters are all tall and skinny boys. And he wants to say, I belong here, and win their opinion back, rather than like kind of don't let the propaganda win, but he realises it's not a smart impulse. Then there's a bit of chat about work, and Havelock has got a load of paperwork to do, Miller and Havelock, for the project he's been working on, and they need to get it done. And Miller's like, well, Havelock's like, I'll do it, it's calm, I'll stay at home. And Miller kind of realises it's the right thing to do, because ever since the riots, Havelock had been served last at a bar, other police officers have been like, Miller, you're a good guy, sorry to be with the Earther. And Miller wants to protect the guy, make sure he's safe and stuff, and he realises that also isn't a smart impulse of trying to look after him too much. And Havelock's like, why don't you do that bullshit case of yours? And it's the Julie Mao one. And Miller's like, yeah, I haven't even touched it since I've been given it, but I may as well. Then they kind of discuss it a bit, and they're like, may as well do it. Havelock's like, I'll do the paperwork. Shadid gave you that, like the boss of the station gave Miller that case specifically. So you should probably do that. And if you feel bad about it, you can buy me a beer. Because Havelock is still that team player, like happy guy, happy to tuck in, which makes it all the worse that he's suffering all this ethnic banter. Finally, before they leave, Havelock admits to Miller that he's talking about a rotation, and he says he talked to some of those proto-gen contractors that pass through, and they want a new lead investigator. and he wants to go somewhere with a sky over his head. But it says, despite all the, even with all the bluff masculinity of police work, it couldn't keep the wistfulness out of his voice. And Miller says it's a good move. He's obviously worried about his partner. Like, classic Miller thing of wants to be an hard boy sometimes, and just wants to actually just look after Havelock because he does quite like him. And I think Havelock's kind of realising this isn't what he wanted. People aren't seeing past his race. He talked about that a couple chapters ago. And he wants to kind of get out of there and find somewhere else. And it's particularly interesting that he mentions Protogen already, because obviously they become quite important later on, and particularly like I think it's like book 3, quite a bit later on as well, maybe even 4. Anyway, so Miller's off to go see Julie. Well, their apartment anyway, because we don't know where the fuck she is. And she lives in a 14-tiered tunnel. It's a great inverted V that's half a kilometre wide at the top and no more than a standard tube width at the bottom. And it used to be one of the engines that got the asteroid spinning about like hundreds of years ago. And now holes are like buried into the side like termites, and someone at the bottom is flying a kite. And the hole itself is like any other hole in series. It's 3 small rooms, a general living space, a bedroom hardly larger than the cot it contained, then a stall with a shower, toilet, and half a sink, all within elbow distance. A standard design. He'd seen it 1,000 times. Yeah, it just sounds like a little container, really. Like barely, must be less than like 6 by 6 meters. But you know, plentiful, cheap housing. Only if we had that. We have this future to look forward to. Housing. None of this London nonsense of mold infested. You get these. Miller kind of walks in and he does his I'm a cool detective, whatever people think of me move, and he reserves judgment and just lets his impressions kind of sit in, and he just lets his first impression waft over him and his subconscious kind of absorb it all. And he thinks Spartan was the wrong word. It's simple, but it's not Spartan. And he looks on the wall, and there's very little things. There's some awards about her brown belt and her another belt in jiu-jitsu for Judy Mao from the Institute that are quite far apart, and there's space on the wall for her black belt that she hasn't got yet. So she has a purple and brown belt, but not a black. The drawers only have 2 changes of clothes. One was heavy canvas and denim for working on a ship, and the other's blue linen with a silk scarf. One for work, one for play. It was less than Miller owned, and he was hardly a clothes horse. Clothes horse, yeah, strange. I like that one, but I haven't heard that much before. And then the fridge has got some old takeaways that have gone spoiled and some beers. And obviously Miller, because he's a fucking legend, grabs some of those beers and opens her computer with the password he was given by Shadid. And as he's going around, the computer is very, very clean and organised, and he starts realising the place isn't Spartan, but elegant. Elegant in its simplicity. Like a Marie Kondo kind of place. And there's rigour for later on going through the documents, but now he just kind of has a quick browse for a few things and uses his first impressions. All the messages apparently like filtered into subfolders like a belter, because obviously belters are all, remember, autistic and on top of like their maintenance stuff, so it all kind of sorted out that way. And he looks through it, and there's not much politics, propaganda, or religious stuff. And Miller decides Julie was the kind of woman who would sacrifice for a cause, but not the kind who take joy in reading the propaganda. Which is quite a nice description there. But we also learned that Julie signed up for a low-G, low-pressure dating service in February of the previous year and cancelled it in June without having used it, which is fun. I do wonder how the months... I suppose the months is like based on Earth time still, rather than belt time, because obviously the belt wouldn't have gone around the sun the entire time. But interesting anyway. And then there's like, he goes through messages for a bit, and one of the folders in her personal messages is called Bullshit Guilt Trips, and he has a look there, and it's 50 messages dating back 5 years, all from the Mal Kwiatkowski mercantile system, which is what her dad owns. And before he starts reading them, he kind of thinks there's an element of voyeurism in being a detective. Everything here is legal, what he's doing. He's allowed to go through all this to learn about them, and it's important that he knows that only her toiletries are in a bathroom, who she's messaged, which dating service she had, and the only ethical suspect thing he'd done is take the beer. But that's fine, because he's a fucking legend. And despite all that, knowing what he's done is perfectly legal, he still hesitates about reading these personal messages, because it doesn't really go away. And we get this letter. He opens this letter from her mum. And what's interesting in this is it says it's like the handwriting was delicate and legible, either done with a calligraphic software good enough to vary letter shape and line width, or else handwritten. Which is interesting, because I suppose belters would never actually use handwriting normally. They'd all use like screens, etc., because they couldn't get paper out there and grow it. It'd be very expensive, any organics like that. Which is interesting when you think there must be software to kind of turn typing into what looks like handwriting by changing all the letters. It's just one of the little things about the universe that kind of adds to it all, which you'd never really consider. Like, Belter society would never use handwriting. Like, I'd be surprised if any of them even write, because the whole point is you just type everything. Unless you draw on the paper, but I suppose that's just less efficient. Anyway, the mum is complaining that, like, you never talk to me. This is, why do you never talk to me? We're thinking about selling the Razorback, which is her ship we learnt about the other week. And there's like this big letter, and Miller basically scans it and goes, right, this is basically just saying, if you don't do as we say, we'll get rid of your toys. If you don't write, if you don't come home, if you don't love us, we'll just throw all your toys away. And Julie hadn't replied, but she'd left a few drafts. And Miller starts reading the drafts, and the first draft is like, I can't believe how selfish and petty and crude you are. I can't believe you sleep at night. And he's like, the rest of the entire letter's just taking the piss out of her, the first draft, just being mean to her mum. And then the second draft is like, I'm so sorry we've been estranged all these years, and I know how hard it's been for you. I never meant to hurt you with my decisions, etc. Much more conciliatory. And Miller's like, steady on, kid. Like, you've gone from being like, what's the final one going to be? And the final one just says, Adrienne, who's her mother's name, do what you have to do, Julie. Oh, cold, harsh. Miller laughs and like raises his beer and like, congratulations. And thinks, if I ever catch this girl, if I have to ship her back, it's not going to be fun for anybody. I mean, at least because this girl's fucking, as we learned in the prologue, she's like a ninja, some space ninja of all her jiu-jitsu things. And so Miller's kind of enjoying it there, sipping his beer, and he opens the most recent message, which only arrived recently from her dad rather than her mum. It says, Julie, this is not a joke. This is not one of your mother's drama fits. I have solid information that the belt is about to be a very unsafe place. Whatever differences we have, we can work out later. For your own safety, come home now. Miller goes, oh shit. He starts frowning. And you can hear the kids playing outside. It'd been sent from Luna 2 weeks before James Holden and the Canterbury raised the spectre of war between Mars and the Belt. This sideshow was getting interesting. So once again, the authors of this do that fantastic cliffhanger thing at the end of every chapter. But you start realising that Miller kind of being his detective, these things in the Belt, things are moving towards war and hostility. And then also you realise this very powerful, very connected man is telling her daughter, who he had fallen out with, to get out the Belt because he knows something's going down. So we start getting the detective side of Miller's going to get going. But yeah, lovely little chapter. Bit more universe building, a little bit more about Julie, which is nice. A bit more tragic as the story will develop. But yeah, very good. Cheers, team, and I'll see you soon.